Over the past few months, a quiet conversation has been happening across the United States. It's not something you'll usually see in the headlines, and it's not the kind of topic people normally bring up at dinner. But more and more households are starting to notice something unusual when they open their monthly electric bill. The total looks different, sometimes higher, sometimes just structured in a way that feels unfamiliar. At first, many people assume it's just normal fluctuation. Maybe the weather changed. Maybe the air conditioner ran longer than usual. Maybe energy prices moved a little. But when the same pattern shows up month after month, people naturally start asking questions. What exactly are we paying for when we pay our electricity bill? And why do some of the numbers seem to change even when our daily habits stay exactly the same? The interesting part is that once you start looking closely at how electricity pricing actually works in the U.S., you begin to realize there are several moving parts behind the scenes, parts that most people rarely think about until something draws their attention to it. Electricity is one of those things we depend on every single day, yet most of us don't spend much time thinking about how the system behind it actually operates. The lights turn on, the appliances run, and the bill arrives at the end of the month. For many households, that's about as far as the curiosity goes. But recently, more people across the country have started paying closer attention to the details inside that bill, not because they suddenly became energy experts, but because something about the numbers made them pause and look twice. In this video, we're going to walk through some of the factors that influence electricity pricing in the United States and why certain changes can appear on monthly statements. Understanding these components can help make sense of what you're seeing when you review your own bill. And before we dive in, if you find topics like this interesting, things that affect everyday life but often stay behind the scenes, consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always interesting to see how energy costs compare from one city to another. To understand why people are starting to notice changes on their electric bills, it helps to first understand how those bills are typically structured. While every utility company has its own format, most electricity bills in the United States are made up of several different components working together. The first and most obvious part is the actual energy usage. This is usually measured in kilowatt hours, often shortened to kilowatt hour. Every time you run a light, charge a device, or turn on an appliance, electricity is being consumed and measured to the meter connected to your home. That usage number is then multiplied by a rate set by the energy provider. On the surface, this seems straightforward. Use more electricity and the bill goes up, use less and the bill goes down. But the reality is often more layered than that simple equation. Electricity systems operate within large regional networks that balance supply and demand across entire states, and sometimes multiple states at once. Power plants, renewable energy sources, transmission lines, and substations all play a role in delivering electricity to homes and businesses. Because of this complex infrastructure, many electric bills include additional categories beyond just energy usage. These may include delivery charges, infrastructure maintenance costs, grid reliability programs, and other regulatory fees approved by local authorities. For someone quickly glancing at their bill, these sections might look like small line items, but when combined, they can represent a significant portion of the total monthly amount. Another factor that can influence what appears on a bill is seasonal demand. Electricity usage tends to rise during extreme temperatures, especially in the summer when air conditioning units are running for longer periods of time. When demand across the grid increases, energy markets sometimes adjust pricing to balance supply and maintain system stability. This doesn't necessarily mean anything unusual is happening. In many cases, it's simply the energy system responding to changing conditions. However, when several factors shift at the same time, such as demand levels, infrastructure costs, and regional energy supply, the end result can appear on the bill in ways that people didn't notice before. And that's often the moment when curiosity starts. People open their bill, compare it to a previous month, and realize that the structure or total looks slightly different than expected. But that's only one piece of the picture. Because when you look deeper into how electricity flows through the system, you begin to see how many different layers influence the final number that shows up each month. And this is where things start to get even more interesting. Electricity is unique compared to many other services we pay for because it has to be produced and delivered in real time. Unlike products that can be stored in warehouses, most electricity must be generated at the exact moment it's being used. That means power plants, grid operators, and energy markets constantly coordinate to match supply with demand. Every second of the day, the system is balancing how much electricity people need with how much energy is being produced. In the United States, this balancing act often happens through regional energy markets. These markets determine which power plants generate electricity at certain times and what the wholesale price of energy will be for that moment. Those wholesale prices can shift depending on several factors, including fuel costs, weather patterns, maintenance schedules for power plants, and even transmission capacity between regions. While most consumers don't directly see these market movements, the effects can sometimes appear indirectly in the pricing structures used by utility companies. For example, some utilities adjust rates periodically to reflect broader market conditions or operational costs. These adjustments may show up as small differences across billing cycles, sometimes within categories that people rarely notice. Another layer involved the infrastructure required to move electricity across long distances. High-voltage transmission lines connect generating stations to cities and communities. Local distribution networks then carry that power into neighborhoods and homes. Maintaining and upgrading that infrastructure is an ongoing process. Power lines, substations, transformers, and grid control systems all require monitoring and maintenance to keep the system stable. Over time, investments in infrastructure improvements can influence how certain delivery charges appear on customer bills. These adjustments are typically reviewed and approved through regulatory processes, but many households only become aware of them when they appear in monthly statements. There are also broader trends shaping the energy landscape. Across the country, the mix of electricity generation has been gradually evolving. Traditional sources, such as coal and natural gas, are now operating alongside growing levels of renewable energy like solar and wind. Each energy source has its own cost structure, operational characteristics, and infrastructure requirements. Integrating these sources into a reliable grid sometimes introduces new operational considerations that influence how the system is managed. From a consumer perspective, all of these moving parts remain largely invisible until something causes a closer look at the bill. And recently, that closer look is exactly what many households seem to be taking. But the most interesting part may not be the individual charges themselves. It may actually be how understanding the structure of the bill can change the way people think about their energy use and the system behind it. When people start examining their electric bills more carefully, one of the first realizations is how much information is actually packed into those statements. Beyond the total amount due, many bills include detailed breakdowns of usage patterns, rate categories, delivery services, and additional charges tied to operating the electrical grid. For someone seeing these categories for the first time, the bill can almost feel like a snapshot of the entire energy system supporting their home. It reflects not just personal consumption, but also the network of generation facilities, transmission infrastructure, regulatory policies, and market dynamics working together behind the scenes. And that's often the point where curiosity deepens. Instead of just asking, why is my bill higher? People begin asking a different question. What exactly makes up this number? Understanding the structure of an electric bill doesn't necessarily change the system itself, but it can provide useful context. When people know what different charges represent, the numbers on the page often feel less mysterious. Some households also choose to explore tools that help visualize how electricity costs are distributed across usage, delivery, and other system components. These kinds of breakdown tools can sometimes make it easier to see which parts of a bill are tied to consumption and which parts relate to broader infrastructure or market factors. If you're curious about looking more closely at how electricity costs can be broken down and explained, there's a resource linked in the description that many people use to explore this topic in more detail. It simply provides a way to look at the structure behind energy costs and understand the different elements that can appear on a bill, whether someone chooses to explore it or not. The key takeaway is that electricity pricing is part of a larger system, one that operates quietly in the background of everyday life. Most of the time, we don't notice it at all. The lights turn on, the devices charge, and everything works as expected. But every once in a while, Something on that monthly bill catches our attention and reminds us just how complex the system behind a simple switch can actually be. And once you start noticing it, you begin to see that there's much more happening behind that number than most people ever realize.